Hello and welcome to Final Light. I'm your host Soumya Singh. Tonight we step into one of the most darkest and unforgettable stories in Indian modern history. A pregnant woman fleeing a village torn apart by hatred, a mob chasing in, and a family destroyed in minutes. A survivor whose voice would one day expose corruption, manipulation, and a truth that the system desperately tried to bury. This episode contains description of sexual violence, murder, communal brutality, and crime against women. So, if this episode is too much for you emotionally, I would totally understand. I will see you in the next one. I want to also highlight an Indian charity that is Himmat. Himmat is an Indian non-profit that provides legal support, therapy, and rehabilitation for survivors who are suffering from sexual violence or domestic violence. Their work represents hope, the same hope Bilkis fought so bravely for. The link will be in the description. If you need it, please check it out. And if you can donate to this charity in any way possible, that will be great as well. Now, let's begin with the story of Bilkis Bano. To understand her story, we must understand the violence around her. On 27 February 2002, the coach 6 of Sabarmati Express caught fire near Godhra district, killing 59 Hindu passengers. This incident ignited one of the worst communal riots in independent India. For weeks, homes were burned, families fled, and Muslim women were assaulted. People were killed in broad daylight. The police response was slow, inconsistent, and widely criticized. Over 1,000 people were killed through many riots and many fires. Many people believe that the actual number was much, much higher. It was this atmosphere of mass violence. Bilkis' family became refugee in their own state. They felt they have nowhere to go because everywhere there was violence for Muslim women and men. On 3rd March 2002, a group of 17 fleeing Muslim women and men, including Bilkis, were stopped near Childora and Radhipur village. There was a mob that appeared and they attacked the group. The attackers were armed with swords, iron rods, petrol cans, and wooden sticks. They recognized the family. They called out their names. And then the violence began. Bilkis was 5 months pregnant. She was gang raped by at least three individuals, and her 3 years old daughter, Shileha, was slammed to the ground and her skull was fractured. Four women from her extended family were sexually assaulted. Their bodies were later found naked and burned partially. At least 7 members of her family was murdered that day. The mob used blunt force trauma, resulting in multiple fractures, skull injuries, and sharp weapon wounds. Bilkis was also struck on head and left unconscious for hours. She woke up surrounded by dead bodies of her own family. I cannot begin to imagine what she went through. I would never understand how could anybody do this? How can someone have this much hatred for somebody in their heart, especially when you know them? Remember, they were calling her by her name. They knew who she was. These people who were involved in the riot was somebody who went to school with her, who lived near her house. And then, when she tried to fled, they started chasing her. And then they did this to her and her family. When she woke up, she walked for miles until she found a home where she felt safe enough to hide. And she contacted police. The Gujarat police actively sabotaged this case. This is so heartbreaking. I cannot even imagine what she went through, and even after this happened to her. Her family's bodies were buried without forensic examinations. There were no attempts in recovering any sexual assault evidence. The site of crime was washed. It was washed. I cannot believe this. The site was washed, and medical examination reports were altered. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. Like, how can you wash a scene of crime? Why would somebody do that if a politician is not behind this? And there were false records that was filed in the case filing. So Bilkis gave a statement where she accused 20 people for this assault and the riot, and officer note down that only 6 people were her attacker or attacker of her family who were involved. Police officer, the first officer who was on this scene and who was with her, they wrote that the case was for riot, not for rape and murder. This is ridiculous. I don't understand how can this much of evidence could be minimized to falsify somebody of the crime, and how heartbreaking this was for her. Remember, this is 2002, so it's not that far back, it's pretty recent. 20 years is not that much in the grand scheme of things. It's not like it was 80 years ago or 90 years ago. It is very close to the reality that we live in right now. 20 years is not that much. There were many key failures in the forensic schemes of things, like there were no vaginal swab that was taken from the victims to see if there is any sexual assault that happened. No blood samples were preserved. There was no photograph taken on the scene. This is ridiculous. This is 2002. It's not 1970. And bones of Bilkis's family was mixed with mass graves. It made the identification for the victims impossible because this is ridiculous. She saw it happen in front of her. There is an eyewitness to the whole crime, and this is what the police is doing. And not just this, there were threats and intimidation on Bilkis. They pressured her to settle and to withdraw this case. They warned her that she could be arrested if she lied in front of the officer. She could be arrested for that. And there were so many failures that the Supreme Court called it the mockery of justice. Literally, how much you have to fuck up to do this. And this is not incompetence. This is not somebody who is not doing their job correctly. This is falsifying evidence deliberately. They deliberately tried to falsify evidence and to make it impossible to identify anything in this case. But Bilkis Bano refused to let this case go. Her incredible nature and her effort to get justice to her and to her family led this case to the Supreme Court. Then this case was passed on to CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation. They have to start everything from the scratch. Everything that the Gujarat police have done so far was falsifying evidence, and the investigation led to nothing. They were not able to even get the facts straight. The timelines of the police that they had was wrong, and they had falsified so many evidence that the CBI had to make this case a priority, and they have to investigate each and every lead again, each and every eyewitness, or each and every evidence or forensics. Nothing was taken that they can use, and the time it took for CBI to be involved in this case, so much evidence was destroyed or was missing or was falsely reported that it was so hard for CBI to start over with this case. But they did, and they located that mass grave, and they used osteological analysis to identify the fracture consistent with mob assaults. They were able to get the body and get the details from the body, and they were able to better understand what happened that day and how the attack happened. They also took soil samples from the location that matched the human blood trace, and CBI reconstructed the timeline using call records, witness statements, and police station diaries and vehicle movements. For the police station diaries, they had to start over with the witness statements again, because there was something else on the witness statements, and the Gujarat police has wrote down something else, and that was so exhausting and time consuming for this particular case. I don't understand why. Actually, I do. Why? But how can somebody be this corrupt? How can they do this kind of evil thing on the name of religion, just because she was Muslim? And if you say that Muslims are doing these things, for example, the Gujarat tried the Coach 6 was there was fire on Coach 6 because of terrorist attack. But then what is this? Then what you are doing to this poor woman and her family? What would you consider this? There is no excuse for these people, and they are evil. There is no justification. Nobody would agree with these people and what they did. This case is so heartbreaking and so horrible. This has so many layers to it and so many details that I would not be able to cover the whole case in one video. I would have to make this two-parter series, so that the continuation of the second part will be in a week, and I will post that video in a week. But there are so many things in this case that we have to consider. So, in the next video, we will check the documents and the findings of CBI, and we will also go through the trial and the whole process of conviction after the sentencing. So, we'll talk about that, but I hope that you find this video entertaining. Not entertaining, more educational, and to understand why people do these things. Thank you for listening to The Final Line. I'm your host, Soumya Singh. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember every silence hides a story.